Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're getting into part 4 and 5 of God of Hammers, which is also us wrapping up with the conclusion of God of Hammers. And really, there are just so many brilliant aspects about this story altogether. I just love it. So let's jump in. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so with Thor just coming to the realization that the God of Hammers is Mjolnir, to only then have the bomb dropped on him that Mjolnir is merged with the Mangog, which on one hand explains why Mjolnir has been moving on this path of annihilation with the rage of a billion beings, but also while they're here in Broxton, Oklahoma, in the wake of the devastation caused by Mjolnir. Thor's arm is broken, Odin's back is just completely gone at this point, with that hit from Mjolnir just shattering his back at full speed. But at this point where it seems like all hope is lost for Thor, we then go to Beta Ray Bill, who's gathering up warriors and heroes to make their way to Oklahoma to fight at Thor's side. And this recruitment that he does is pretty cool, because more or less he's like, my weak people stand to the left, my real fighters get to the right. And he rounds up warriors from Asgard, as well as the Fantastic Four, Ben Reilly Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Captain America, Iron Man, Throg, Lockjaw, Lockheed, Wolverine. But he lets everyone here know that one way or another, this is gonna end in blood. But with Thor at this point snapping his arm back into place, with him talking to Mjolnir, he believes that she's been possessed by Mangog. And with Mjolnir returning here, he can at least help her with finding a way to separate Mangog from her, with again, Thor believing that she's being possessed. But Mjolnir clears it up for Thor pretty quickly, with letting Thor know that she's not possessed, but rather that the Mangog had opened her eyes, which like we knew prior to now, that this isn't a case of just Mjolnir being taken over by the Mangog, but instead these are two entities who have been wronged by Odin, who have now been remade as one. And with the way that Mjolnir goes to describe this further, she just tells Thor that she's been given a voice. And with her saying that, it just tells Thor that she meant to do what she did, as far as the annihilation in Nidavellir in Oklahoma, as well as the rest of the devastation and destruction that she's caused across the 10 realms. And when this happens, it's here where Beta Ray Bill and the other heroes, as well as the other warriors, make their way to the fight. And when they show up, Thor just cries out to these guys no, y'all not ready. And with Thor saying this, really is because he doesn't want them there, because he knows that the God of Hammers will just see them there as another opportunity for her to kill more people who are close to Thor. So when they show up here and they're trying, they're really trying, but they're not doing damage. But then it's here where Thor gets on his knees and he prays to his mother, with him saying, "Mother, I need you. Please hear me. Grant me your gifts. Give me your power, so that I may protect those in need, so that I may save my father." And it's right there where Thor gets an answer from his mother. And he's like, ah, there you are. And when this happens, it's also us getting the confirmation of who Thor's actual mother is. Because when Thor gets his answer from his mother, it's not a bird that's on fire, but instead is an energy tornado, which is pretty much Donny Cates confirming that Thor's mother is still Gia, and otherwise putting a reverse Uno card on Jason Aaron. And when this happens, the heroes are initially like, okay, what? And Reed Richards points out that this energy tornado, it's pretty much impenetrable. And it's here where Freya lets them know that this is Thor creating a barrier to protect them. And with how she says this, you can tell that Freya also understands that this is Gia stepping in for her son. But also with this happening, I want to point out that this whole God of Hammers event, in a way it kind of reminds me of Spider-Man Homecoming, when Tony told Peter, if you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it. And to me, in moments like this, it's very much like Thor being tested the same way, with him not having Mjolnir. And this time, it's very different than other times where we've seen Thor without Mjolnir, because we've seen that song and dance a few times. But now with God of Hammers, it's really cranking up the things that define Thor that are not Mjolnir. Because to most people, when you say Thor, they're expecting Mjolnir, almost like when you say hamburger, like you expecting buns. So for this event, that's pretty much Thor versus Mjolnir and Mangog, as well as the aftermath with Donald Blake and Devourer King and him newly becoming king, and Thor having to deal with most of this without the hammer. And it's really us seeing him step out of a place of comfort and out of a space where he was confident and somehow find a solution by just being Thor, which at this point kicked in nicely that he's the son of Gia, and it causes Thor to lean more into who he is rather than just picking up another hammer or just him running back to Yarnborn. But then it's here where Thor asks Mjolnir, why have you killed so many in my name? And it's here where she tells Thor that the Mangog had opened her eyes, because with the Mangog being another one of Odin's sins, with the Mangog being the hatred of a billion beings that Odin had slaughtered for whatever reason when they're in the sun, the Mangog taught Mjolnir that the gods deserve a reckoning for the games that they play. And it's here where Mjolnir says this, that she lets Thor know that her and Mangog sent the serpent to Donald Blake, which is what caused Donald Blake to discover the truth about himself and the sandbox that he was living in. To where then, after Donald Blake had learned the truth and then killed the serpent, which for Mjolnir is pretty much a confession of her and Mangog starting the whole prey event. But with her saying this, it's here where Thor encases the god of hammers within a huge pillar of rocks and vines, and as soon as he does, he then hears his father Odin calling for him. And even when Thor rushes to Odin, you can still hear in the background like the god of hammers breaking through that pillar, like it's not gonna hold for long. But then it's here with Thor rushing to Odin, to where initially he tells his father, I gotta get you somewhere to get you some help, I can carry you. But then Odin lets Thor know that he's not going anywhere. And with Odin saying this, he's like, Mjolnir was right. And Odin tells Thor that all of his creations have come undone. Everything. Except you. Except for Thor. And he tells Thor, you are the greatest thing that I've ever made. And when Odin says that, man, those mighty tears get to falling. And it's really a big moment because Odin doesn't talk to Thor like this, bro. Like, he doesn't. But then it's here with Odin telling Thor that there was so much more that he still wanted to do. He wanted to see Thor's mother again, and he wanted to be strong, which is the reason why he held back from giving Thor the entirety of the Odin Force. But when he says this to Thor, he really doesn't spell it out all the way. But even still, it kind of feels like Thor more or less knows what Odin is getting at, and you can tell by the fear in Thor's eye. And it's here where Odin tells Thor, the Odin Force, boy, it cannot be given in full until I am gone. And it's here where Odin gives Thor the rest of the Odin Force in its entirety. And with the way that this happens with Thor just screaming, Father, no, don't, it very much looks like that moment when the Odin Force was born, when Odin's brothers Vili and Ve gave up their life force and passed it to Odin, creating the Odin Force. In the moment when they were facing Surtur, and the two of them sacrificed themselves rather than fleeing and allowing Surtur to leave Muspelheim. And in this moment for Odin, he's doing the same for his son, and it really feels like Thor issue 349. With Odin passing the entirety of the Boar's son birthright, the entirety of the Odin Force, to his son Thor, the king of Asgard. And it's a really emotional moment because like I'm not a father, but I've been a son my entire life. So for us to see a lot of those fresh moments of the arguments between Thor and Odin, to where you get those moments where the anger or the frustration is expressed, but then on the flip side, we get multiple moments where Odin proves again and again, in spite of his flaws, he loves his son. Because it wasn't too long ago that he took Mjolnir to the back for his son, like, come on. And then to see him here, pass the Odin Force to Thor in its entirety, it just has me like, man, like I would love to see this story amongst a number of others with just full Odin commentary. But then also when this happens, the god of hammers breaks out from that pillar, but with doing so, only then to behold the Golden King of Asgard. Which again, for me at least, this story's really hitting the nail on the head as far as fulfilling Thor in his position, without the need of Mjolnir defining him. And like I said, we've seen the concept done in other ways before, but this time here with both Gia and Odin blessing the Golden Child, who's in this moment facing who I would say are two of Thor's biggest oppositions, being his own hammer and Mangog. But then it's here where Thor then tells Sif to send him her sword, Hofund. And with doing this, he lets her know that he's gonna give it back, but you know, the king's gotta do some stuff. But it's here for Thor, with using Hofund, he summons the Bifrost, and he binds Mjolnir with it, letting her know that she is a great and dreadful storm. And with saying this, he tells her, but nonetheless, I am still your god. And it's here where Thor sends the two of them to Nidavellir, and initially Mjolnir is like, where are we? And when she says that, I'm just thinking like, man, all these years and she hasn't done a full tour? But with Thor bringing her here to the forge, he cranks the heat up to the heat of 1 billion suns. And when he does, he just walks into it. Like, that's a flex right there, man. Come on. And he tells Mjolnir, this is where you were born and this is where you will die. And when this happens, she quickly tries to strike him with the hammer, but Thor just grabs it, telling Mjolnir that she cannot hurt him, to where then he starts striking the forge repeatedly with the hammer, up to the point to where the hammer is just completely destroyed. And with Thor doing this, like I'm telling you, I can't stress it enough, this story really feels like the definitive answer to who is Thor without the hammer. But with Thor doing this and destroying Mjolnir, we're told in this moment that Mjolnir is the last remnant of Odin's legacy, and with Thor smashing it to pieces, is the last step of the entropy, which, as we've seen before, the entropy part of the huge cycle, it was the work and the enchantments of Odin's creations being undone. So with Thor destroying the hammer, he's completing the entropy portion of that cycle, to where, like we've seen before, one part of the cycle, it affects the other, and in this moment, all the pieces were present: fire, rage, eternity, entropy, and most definitely annihilation. But for Thor, with him exerting this much power, he exhausts the Odin Force, which at this point I guess you could say is the Thor Force in its fullness, which is now taking Thor into a Thor sleep, or the All Sleep as Sif would say, which is the same as your Odin sleep or your Odin rest. But for Thor, with him falling into the sleep, when he wakes up, 4 months have passed, which for Odin was one of those things to where the amount of time that he needed for the Odin rest, it would be determined by how fast Odin drained the Odin Force. But in this case, with the 4 months, I'm cool with that, because it would suck for Thor to wake up way later when we know that there's things in the future that he still has to take care of. But for Thor, it's here where he wakes up and Angela's there, Freya's there, Loki's there, and Thor lets them know before he had woken up he had heard the voice of Odin. And it's here where Angela tells him that since Thor's been asleep, they haven't had a ceremony for Odin, partially because there really wasn't a body left after what happened, but then also because when they do have that ceremony, it would only be right to have it when Thor's there. But with everyone trying to help Thor up out of his sleep and give him things that he needs, and it's here where Angela's just like, okay, bump all that, I know what he needs, to where from there she tells Thor to finish getting dressed and meet her in the armory. And with Thor hearing this, he's kind of like, the armory. But when they go there, it's here where Angela shows Thor that within that time of the past 4 months, all the angels of heaven, they came together and reassembled Thor's hammer. And with us seeing this, it's a really big moment, especially with what we'd seen before with Angela expressing that if Thor didn't clean up his mess, that she would, which before meant her taking the throne if he didn't figure this whole thing out. But since he did work things out, and the destruction of his hammer was the only quote-unquote mess that he'd left behind, Angela stayed true to her word, and she cleaned up by getting the angels to reassemble Thor's hammer, which really just reaffirms that Angela never really wanted to take the throne from Thor. But also back at the time when she saw that things were getting out of hand and she summoned both Thor and Odin, she knew that the solution had to do with Thor and Odin working together. But in the middle of this conversation, Angela, she just leaves, straight up Batman style, like she don't say nothing. But while Thor's here, he then gets on his knees and he prays to his father, because in this moment he's even hesitating to pick up the hammer, and for that reason he drops to his knees and he prays to his father because Thor's just uncertain about the path that he should take. And it's here where Thor hears a voice saying, "Keep your eyes open, boy. A king can't rule from his knees." And with hearing this, Thor looks up at the hammer and he's like, "Father?" And at this point, I don't know if Odin's in the hammer or he's speaking through the hammer, but I'm pretty sure we'll get those answers towards the end of this month once we get Thor issue 750, which is also the 60th anniversary of Thor, to where in that issue we'll get Odin's funeral as well as a ton of new stories from Donny Cates, J. Michael Straczynski, Walt Simonson, Al Ewing, and a ton of others, so who knows what we'll learn from there. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.